You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast hosted by Matt Franks and Zach Bechtold. We hope you enjoy this week's show, and you can find out more about us by going online at beardedtheologians.com, where you can pick up a few t-shirts, listen to a few old episodes, and find ways that you can connect with us. Thank you for listening. You are listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast hosted by Matt Franks.
And Zach Bechtold.
You're looking at me weird. Like, what's...
You cut out.
Oh, I didn't on my end. So,
well, of course you didn't, because you can hear your own voice.
Oh, this is a great start to a beautiful day, isn't it? With that in mind, Zach, why Scripture?
Why Scripture?
Why Scripture, Zach?
That's always a fun question. Coming off of what we talked about last week and how we grow in our discipleship and kind of what that means, and looking back over the years and how we grow, what we've grown into, what we've grown away from. Scripture is one of those things that in my life has been held an interesting place. Not growing up in the church, much like your own story. Scripture didn't have a foundational element in my childhood through any form. I didn't do VBS, I didn't do camp, I didn't do things like that would have brought Scripture into my life. And so I really started digging into the Bible once I was in high school, late in high school, at best, and really started digging to it thoughtfully in college. And it's always been an interesting back and forth for me on what is Scripture, why is it important, and why does it matter to me? And of course, as a pastor, it matters deeply, right? But I think that's one of the reasons why I pursued this calling into the pulpit, into ordination, and into being a pastor, was as I started digging into Scripture and asking questions. The first church I started doing in that wasn't terribly receptive to questions regarding Scripture. And I don't know that I was ever asking anything that I wouldn't encourage people to ask today, but like anything crazy, like it was just why is this the thing that it is, and why do we talk about it this way? Is there more? Is there less? What is it? And yeah, I really found a foundation in asking the question why, especially in regards to Scripture and what is it and what does it mean, not only in the days in which it was written, in the days in which it was continued to be told and shared, but today, and why it still matters to us today. And we've really just found a foundation in that question of, who, what, when, where, why. Let's ask the questions about this. Let's dig into it more than just the face value. And I think probably the two permissions that I've been given, that I try to give other people, are start with the story. Just read the Scripture as story, and then go from there, as to what we pull out of it and what we believe, from there. I got that both, one for my wife early on, before we got married, and again several times through seminary and with other people. And probably the place I've been able to do that most, or the place I point for people to practice that, is Jonah's story. One, I love Jonah's story because it's, if I remember anything from childhood or any kind of biblical foundation, it was the story of Jonah, or maybe even Noah's Ark was probably another one. But we tell Jonah's story of being kind of a angry, grumpy prophet that goes the other direction, is swallowed by a whale or a fish, depending on what you believe and or what translation you read. And then we stop there. But Jonah has so much more of a robust story about how he brings God's love and grace for all people into a city that he doesn't want to be in. And then when God shows mercy and grace, Jonah goes and pouts. But we don't tell that story. And that's one that I always point people to of one, read this story and read it as scripture, but also read it as story and begin to put yourself in those shoes, in Jonah's shoes. We've all been somewhere we didn't want to be, and there can be good in that, right? We can see God's movement through there. Uh, and really, I mean, I tell that story and I use that story because starting with questioning, is it a fish or a well? Uh, it gets people all up in a tizzy, one way or another, and they can't get past it. And why? It doesn't matter. That's the part of the story that doesn't matter. And yet that's where we get hung up in. And so that's where I find my foundation in scripture and why it's important to me is so that we can tell the rest of the story. Because I think that goes right into the depths of who we are. People may see one thing on the outside or one action or one moment in our life, good, bad, right, or wrong, and yet we have more of a story to tell. And I think that's why scripture has a strong hold in my faith and why I feel important to tell the story. Uh, what about you, Matt?
Um, I think for me, it was when I had started the religion program at Oklahoma City University, and um, I was in my Gospels class and just falling in love with the Gospel Mark of seeing how Jesus operated. Uh, just resonated with me, spoke to me, and just like this,
Mhm.
this, I get this. Like this is amazing, and so it's there, and that's, I mean, I always like it, and it didn't hit me until Sunday when we were talking about we're talking about how Jesus operates in one of the stories we were reading that particular Sunday, and it hit me. I was like, there's a reason why I love Mark so much, Mark and Jesus, because Mark and Jesus is like does an amazing thing. He's like, don't tell anybody. Like it's cool.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like I don't need that press. Good. And I love that. Like
Yeah.
that's like, and I was like, wow, that's me. Like that speaks true to who I am and the way I operate. Like I don't need to be the past. Like I don't need to walk in a room and know that let people
Mhm.
know I'm the pastor. I obviously don't dress the part. I've been told that many a times in my life, and I'm okay with that. Like that's fine. Like that's great. I'm actually okay with that. Like
Mhm.
you're not hurting my feelings by telling me that. That actually affirms my call of that. And it was then I fell in love with scripture then, and then in seminary again, I fell in love with and I'm not I was kind of in the same camp you are of how Paul is just so annoying and
Mhm.
frustrating and like I
But you
remember
love him so much.
I know I fell in love with Paul in seminary and he spoke to me in a way that allowed me to see he was writing these letters for a particular reason to a
Right.
particular community at a particular time. I never understood that before, but also like you, I didn't grow up with my Bible in hand. I didn't even own a Bible until
Right.
I went to my undergrad program. So like um, I wasn't one of those that I still even today I can quote maybe two or three scriptures, and it depends like
Same. Yeah,
whichever
no, that's not a gift I
translation,
have.
like which translation, like but I also like I love to read scripture to say, all right, God, what do you say to me today? But not in a way that's like if there's nothing, that's fine. Like and I think we need to leave that out for space. If you read something in scripture and it doesn't say anything, like you don't feel anything,
Mhm.
that's fine too. Like
That's
that's okay.
okay. Yeah.
Like I don't think we give space for that. I think we say
Mhm.
you read scripture and expect to get something out of it.
Yeah.
It is not a transactional thing.
Mhm.
It's a thing we read to inspire us to see how people lived out their faith, but also to like kind of give us some spiritual direction in a way that like I don't know. When I read the Psalms, like that speaks to me. Like
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
grounds me, and
Yeah.
and it reminds me sometimes I need to be still and know God. Psalm 46:10. I mean, that's about the only one I really know. Getting better at Psalm 23 because of all the funerals, but
Right.
you
Right.
know, um, and I love and value scripture. I also lean into the Methodist understanding of that scripture contains all that is necessary for salvation,
Mhm.
and everything else is a conversation. Like
Mhm.
I think there's value in that. Like I don't see it, and I gotta find a better illustration for this, I don't see it as a VCR manual to reset the clock. Like,
Right.
I
Right.
mean, for those that are under the age of 35, that would be that does not track.
Life hacks. Life hacks is the word you're looking for.
Yes, but I love and value scripture in a way that is, to me, I have a mass respect for it, but I also lean into tradition,
Hmm.
knowing that the way we've interpreted scripture has adjusted over the years, especially with the finding of the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Hmm.
I listened to an amazing conversation about that when I was at Phillips a couple of weeks ago about bringing that to light, because that's not something we talk about.
Hmm.
That Matthew Henry did not have access to the Dead Sea Scrolls when
Right.
he was writing his Bible commentary. It
Right.
doesn't mean that his commentary is a bad commentary. It just
Sure.
means we've learned new things along the way.
Mm.
Um, I also value the experience that, and we talked about this last week, like the way I
Mhm.
read scripture today is not the same that I read when I
Right.
first started out. It's not the same. Like when we read scripture post COVID, it you start to see, like, start to see things like, oh wow, like
Mhm.
I that we my perspective on that has changed. I think, and that's how we can, it's a good way for us to track our growth. Like, and
Mhm.
then also to realize, and we talked about this last night, was like, how fun would it be to preach the same scripture, a couple times a year just to see how people respond, but and
Mhm.
also to use it as an example of how when we read scripture, we see something different every
Yeah.
time, like we
Yeah.
should. Um, and,
I
and, and there's power in that.
I want to do a sermon series sometime, where it's the same scripture 4 weeks in a row, and it's four different people preaching it.
Mm,
But the prerequisite is the people preaching next in line don't get to watch the sermon or get to be in for the other, because I don't want it influenced by the first person, right?
yeah.
And that's hard to be like, I don't want you in church for 3 weeks if you're preaching the fourth Sunday. But to lean into that point of we can read the same thing and find some things that rhyme, but it may hit us all differently. It may hit us the same, right? And to hear that four different times in the ways that we do, I think that would be a great experiment, if you will.
Yeah.
I just haven't figured out how and when to do it. But I think it would be really cool.
Well, maybe you reach out
Even
to
if I
your
couldn't kick
retirees.
Right. Even if I couldn't kick people out for 3 weeks, but see how they build on each other, see how it grows.
Yeah.
To me, I've wanted to do that for years and just haven't done it. Uh, I've written it into my sermon plan a couple of times and then can't commit. Uh, but but that's the thing. And we're reading through the Gospel of John in my pastor's Bible study, and so we talk a lot about the differences between Jesus in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and then John. And that's the one I harp on a lot. That in the first three Gospels, Jesus does something and is like, "Don't tell anyone." And in John, he's like, "Tell everyone." And it makes me one, it just truly makes me laugh because I think it's funny. But it shows the differences of what how people experience Jesus and how they told the story and what that narrative is. And it's the same thing we do today. There are moments that we want to tell everyone, and then there's moments we just want to hold that to ourselves for a minute, and we're not ready to share that bit yet. And I think we see both sides of Jesus in those ways. And the same stories where Jesus heals somebody in one gospel and says, "Get up and go, but don't tell anyone." And what do? They immediately go tell somebody.
I mean, somebody had
Uh,
to say something because
right.
obviously, like,
Right.
somebody heard it.
Yeah. And in John's gospel, he's like, "Get up and go and tell the world." And I don't know. I just think it's a fascinating experience, and that's exactly what we do in our experience with God and where God shows up in our lives. We hold it in the same little container that we always have. Um,
Do you
but yeah.
have a favorite scripture?
Um,
Like right now? Like,
Not well, yeah, yes and no. I mean, my favorite scripture is the back end of Ecclesiastes 3. It's really all of Ecclesiastes. Uh, but there's a through line. There's two through lines in Ecclesiastes. It begins with the author asking the question, "Why are we doing this?" And he says, the teacher says, "Because it's perfectly pointless. Uh, this is what we do because it's been designed by God. God's hands in it." And it's pointless for us, perfectly pointless for us to try to figure it out. To me, that's freeing, and also a little weird, but that continues through that question. That's all Ecclesiastes is. The entire book is asking the question, why are we here? What are we doing? Why does it matter? Um, and the back end of Ecclesiastes 3 starts another through line of, I mean, getting to understand what all of this is. It follows there's time for everything, scripture that we often know so well. And it says, I've discovered what the greatest gift of God is. It is to eat, to drink, and to do what is good while we live. And to me, if you know me even just a little bit, that is the crux of who I am as a person. It's the crux of my theology is we have been given this life to be in community and to do good. And when we do that, I believe that we're growing closer to each other and closer to God. So, yeah, if I had to nail down a theme of verses, it's that one. I use it as often as I can. Um, yeah, what about you?
Um, so I love the original ending of Mark. Uh, verse 16:8, for those of you that don't know
The
that
the snake one?
they're no,
Not the playing with snakes?
not the play mistakes, but the
I don't even know if that's Mark.
for they left, they were overcome with fear,
Yeah.
and they ran.
Hmm.
Uh, and they said nothing to anyone because they were afraid, is the way that ends. But
Yeah.
I always find it interesting, like, yeah, they had told somebody after the grief, like they had to have that
Yeah.
like moment of like, okay, so here's what happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, we just had this experience. I couldn't say anything. I needed some space. I needed some, like, a very introverted conversation here of I needed some time to process. And now that I processed, he's risen.
Hmm. Hmm.
And like, I don't know. But I also think it allows room for like the actual resurrection of Jesus. Definitely would, if we were to experience that in real time, I think we too would run away or be afraid or have some sense of fear. And
Hmm.
that gives that space for fear uh be a part of our journey. There are times when we're going to be afraid because you're going to be faced with something you do not understand.
Hmm.
They were faced with something they don't like. And so it's just one of those things. I always love it. And I didn't understand that at first, but after the many times of studying different things for all sorts of things, like having that alternate, like, this is the first ending, it's like there's a reason why, like,
Hmm.
it, like, if you read it within the whole context, it just makes so much sense. And so,
Right.
like, we don't need the other endings. So,
Right.
um I don't know, it's just that's one that speaks to me. And I joke, I mean, Psalm 46:10 NRSV version, be still and know that I'm God. Although I joked on Sunday that the CEB is slowly growing on me with all that's going on in the world. It translates as, that's enough and know that I'm God. I feel like that's
Yeah.
speaking to me more right now
Hmm.
than
Hmm.
the latter, but
Hmm.
still makes sense to ground ourselves. Um,
Yeah.
so Zach, since the last time that we talked on the podcast, where have you seen God at work in your life?
Um, I told you this story last night. I think for many of our clergy colleagues across the globe, especially across the country, Sunday was hard and heavy because of all of the things going on in the world, and I rarely don't want to be in church on Sunday. I didn't want to be here Sunday. Not because I didn't want to be in community or with my people or preach and do the things. I just um, was tired of holding it all together. Um, for me. And oh, for whatever reason, that was what my sermon was about prior to the weekend. And it was one of those Sundays I preached to myself more than anything else. But my lay leader this week was a retired pastor. of mine named Dan Wanders, who is a delightful man. I love him to death. His spirit's so sweet, so kind. And he emailed me Sunday morning about 7 a.m. Just said, I can't read the call to worship today. I'm angry. I don't, I can't, I can't. He's like, I'm sorry. I hope this doesn't put too much on your plate and an already busy day. And I said, Dan, it's fine. We can figure it out. Maybe this gives us some room to create some different space in the service. And he said, well, thanks. You know, let me think about it again. I'll show up to church early and we can talk about it if you've got a plan B. I was like, great. And he showed up to church and just said, I've thought about it. If you don't mind me prefacing the call to worship with how I'm feeling, I can do it. I was like, Dan, that's great. And he asked me, he was like, well, do you want to know what I'm gonna say? And I just said, no, I don't. Not because I don't care, but because I trust you, Dan. I truly trust what you're going to say, and that you're approaching it with grace. And he said, okay. He looked at me like that. Uh, like all pastors look at people when they're like, you want to know? Are you sure? Yeah, I trust you. And fully meant that. And he prefaced the call to worship beautifully and set the tone for worship, exactly what we needed that morning, and held that space for us to put down the heavy things and come together in community and know that we aren't alone in a lot of ways, and grateful um, to see the spirit move in that way, and make selfishly make space for me to be the pastor I needed to be on Sunday. And so it was definitely one of those moments in real time. I was like, the spirit is here and this is going to be okay. Is it hard? Yes. Do I still not want to do it? Yes. But is it going to be okay? Yes. So yeah, that was it.
I think for me, there was something about Sunday that spoke into what we were talking about in church of reflecting.
Mm,
And I really believe that we could do better at providing space for reflection, but also like saying it's okay to reflect.
hmm
I think we need to give space for that, not in a way that's like demanding you reflect. Like, all right, so you got 10 minutes to think about this, and then you are expected to produce.
Yeah.
But there's something
Yeah.
powerful in sitting at the feet of Jesus and just taking it in and
hmm
listening and being aware. And then there's also that aspect of being active and doing the things that need to get done and caring for community. We talked about Mary and Martha this week, and I towards the end of my sermon I kind of paused and said, it's okay to be still. It's
hmm
okay to ground yourself and to be open to where the spirit may be leading you to maybe be Mary or maybe to be Martha. Either one is needed,
hmm
either one is necessary, and we need the balance of both. And so, give yourself that space this week. Practice that, see what that does to you. And as I've opened myself up to that this week, I have found myself to be more aware of when I need to be one or the other, or when I can just take a deep breath and just be in the presence of things. And it's been fun.
Yeah. It is fun and hard.
Yeah.
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 I I shared a thing on my Facebook this morning, Tuesday. So whenever you're listening to this, Tuesday the 27th, if you follow me on Facebook and want to go back, is a pastor from Minneapolis, a Lutheran pastor who shared the same thing. Just the heaviness of it all, but the hope that we find in God's movement. Um, I had a church member send it to me Sunday afternoon, and um, I don't know. I think the more that we can talk about that and just sit in those moments and reflect and give ourselves the space to just be human, the better off we are.
Well, I also think it allows us not to have an answer every time.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that sometimes we live in a world of mass information, mass consumption of things,
hmm
and that sometimes we just don't have an answer, and that's okay too.
hmm
Um, that we are called to love, and I think, but sometimes loving is just taking a deep breath and just being present in the moment. that's important too.
Mm-hmm.
Listeners, we want to thank you for listening. We have amazing things, in our back catalog of almost 465 plus episodes of things. And we're definitely grateful for you. And so we want to encourage you to go to our website at beardedtheologians.com and listen. And then also pick up some items for Valentine's Day or Groundhog Day or whatever day that you celebrate. I always make good items. And so, again, I am definitely grateful for you, our listeners. And so, for the Bearded Theologians, I'm Matt Franks.
I'm Zach Bechtold. Thanks for checking us out.
Guys, and like this video, and push that thumbs up.
Thank you for listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share on all social media outlets. You can check out old episodes and more information at beardedtheologians.com. Thanks for checking us out.